listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.
Should we each have a carbon footprint allowance? And if you do go over it, you pay more? Wouldn't this be one of the most effective ways to sensitize people to their own carbon footprint and also to provide the pigs among us with both an incentive to reduce or a revenue source funded by them to remediate the damage they're causing? With us is Shikha Dalmia, who is a senior policy analyst at the Reason Foundation, a columnist for Forbes magazine's website, Forbes.com, and a frequent contributor to the Wall Street Journal, as well as Reason.org, where she regularly writes on global warming, healthcare, and economics. Shikha, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Tom.
I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name.
No, that's perfectly
good. Good. So there was this proposal was put forward in the United Kingdom. It looks like it's probably not going to go anywhere, but it's still being seriously considered, or at least debated, that rather than, cap and trade, or perhaps in addition to, because they already have cap and trade there, in addition to cap and trade and other kinds, and high carbon taxes, as they've had for years on gasoline and many petroleum products in the UK and throughout Europe, that there also be an individual carbon limit that we say, okay, each one of us is allowed to use through our various lifestyle choices a certain amount of carbon, and beyond that we have to start paying basically a tax. Why would you oppose that?
Well, why would I oppose that? I am just surprised that anybody would support that. This brings out the civil libertarian in me. I don't think we are at a stage where we need carbon taxes to deal with global warming and what have you. But the absolute worst thing that we can do to deal with this problem would be empowering, our bureaucrats to trace every action that we take in our life. And that's exactly how this plan is going to work. As I understand it, every Brit is going to get a card with a barcode where some bureaucrat in some ministry is going to track, where they are spending their carbon allowance, how they are spending it, and the potential for abuse, from a purely civil libertarian standpoint is just so huge that I'm surprised that, the progressives amongst us, are not, alarm bells are not going on for them.
Well, the UK scene, it's the most watched society in the world. Just watching the movie Pirate Radio over the weekend, you get this sense of how the UK has never been really big on what we would call First Amendment rights here in the United States, privacy, assembly, things like that. And to a certain extent, I share your concerns. Let's, however, deal with perhaps what's the larger issue, which is how do we go about. And actually, let me make another argument for you, and that is that if we simply deal with this at the individual level with carbon taxes, essentially, then people who are very wealthy, who can afford to pay the tax and don't give a damn, will simply pay the tax and jack up the carbon that they're emitting into the atmosphere. And middle-class people, the burden will largely fall on them. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of sales taxes, because they're regressive taxes. This seems to me like a regressive tax. Lacking that, how do we best influence individual behavior unless it's just simply making carbon very expensive? Any product made, it seems like maybe, for example, a value-added tax where at every stage of production of a product, or a service for that matter, because services use electricity, which is, produces carbon, that at every stage along the way, the carbon inserted into that is added the same way that value-added taxes simply measure the increased value in dollars. How about that? Would that work?
Well, I just have to challenge the premise of your question over here.
Mm-hmm.
Most reasonable people agree that global warming is a reality, and anthropogenic global warming is a reality.
Human caused, yes.
Yes, human-caused global warming. There is a human component to our global warming. But, that doesn't mean that this global warming is going to be so dire, as the alarmists are predicting, that we've got to act now, and we've got to act in a way that, basically puts everybody on an energy diet, whether it's through carbon taxes or cap and trade or allowances that we are talking
Shikha,
about.
respectfully, it already is. I mean, we've got carbon reefs or coral reefs all around the world that are dying off. I was a year ago, March, on the border of Darfur in South Sudan, and because the desert is moving south so rapidly as a result of climate change, that's one of the major things that's pushing people south and causing political conflicts across sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, we're already experiencing climate change.
Thom, look, I mean, nobody is disputing that if some of the scenarios pan out, there are going to be dislocations.
No, I'm saying people are dying right now from this.
Well, that's a huge leap. I mean, that really is a huge leap to pin the cause of the African conflict on global warming when there are so many political and economic intervening causes. I mean, to me, seems.
I was there. I talked to people who were saying I could farm my land over the last 50 years. It's been in my family's, for 100 generations, and now it's desert.
Okay, let's just hypothetically assume that everything that you are saying is correct, and that global warming is going to cause, massive dislocations of the type that you are describing. The issue still becomes, what are we better off doing? Are we better off rationing our energy consumption, which will essentially mean, contracting our economy, or are we better off dealing with the effects that you're talking about of global warming?
Well,
I would argue that it is better to do the latter. If you look at Bangladesh, which is supposed to be one of these countries that's going to be very badly affected by global warming because it's in a low-lying
Sure.
sea area and it's going to experience flooding. Bangladesh is no different in its topography and geography than a country like Holland, and yet the effects of global warming on Bangladesh are going to be far more severe than a country like Holland. And the reason is that Bangladesh doesn't have the economic and the political institutions of a Holland to deal with the impact of global warming. So, and one of those institutions are, just an economy that generates wealth, that allows Bangladesh to construct a complicated canal system of the kind that Holland has that will help to keep draining the rising sea level.
But Shikha,
the question is, let me just finish here. So the question is,
I'm not going to let you filibuster the whole show, Shikha. First of all, you're ignoring the third option, which is that we go to energy sources that don't involve the use of carbon. But and with regard to Bangladesh, you're missing, I think, frankly, I think most people miss, and I've spent a fair amount of time in that part of the world, the biggest problem, and that is that the Himalayan glaciers are melting, and they feed 9 major rivers in that part of the world, going east into China, the Yangtze, the Yellow, going south down into Bangladesh and India, the Ganges, and I'm forgetting the names of all these other rivers.
Brahmaputra, I am from India, Thom.
So you know what I'm talking about. I mean, when these glaciers melt, you're gonna see massive flooding and drought.
I'm not disputing that. I'm granting all that. I am granting that, when these...
So in the minute we have left, how would you deal with melting glaciers?
What I would do is give Bangladesh and India and China the tools to deal with these melting glaciers, and that means, the investments in physical infrastructure, not a diet of energy rationing. I would say, let them grow their economies in such a way that they can increase their sewage, their plumbing, their drainage, and all kinds of other systems that will allow them to cope with the effects of global warming, even if they are as dire as you claim they are. That would be a far better way to go than right now putting them on an energy diet and making them much poorer, which will leave them less equipped to deal with the dangers of global warming.
But if carbon becomes more expensive, then alternative energies become less expensive, and they start to proliferate. The only losers are the carbon industry.
No, the losers are all of us, you and me, and everybody who consumes energy. Because if energy becomes more expensive, we have that much less wealth to invest in the things that are going to protect us from global warming.
Okay, Shikha Dalmia, Reason.org. You can read her work over there. Shikha, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on, Thom.
This is the Thom Hartmann